Good day. Today I'm going to discuss the art under Renaissance periods. The Renaissance was a fervent period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages. It promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. The Renaissance is credited with bridging the gap between the Middle Ages and modern day civilization. It is generally described as taking place from the 14th century to the 17th century. Some of the greatest thinkers, authors, statesmen, scientists, and artists in human history thrived during this era, while global exploration opened up new lands and cultures to European commerce. The origins of Renaissance. Florence, Italy was the birthplace of Renaissance. During this so-called Proto-Renaissance period, 1280 to 14,000, Italian scholars and artists saw themselves as reawakening to the ideals and achievements of classical Roman culture. This is where the wealthy people, Catholic church leaders, and merchants began to pay artists to complete works. Writers such as Petrarch and Giovanni Boccaccio looked back to ancient Greece and Rome and sought to revive the languages, values, and intellectual traditions of those cultures after the long period of stagnation. In the later 14th century, the Proto-Renaissance was stifled by plague and war, and its influences did not emerge again until the first years of the next century. In 1401, the sculptor Lorenzo Ghiberti won a major competition to design a new set of bronze doors for the baptistery of the Cathedral of Florence, beating out contemporaries such as the architect Filippo Brunelleschi and the young Donatello, who would later emerge as the master of early Renaissance sculpture. The other major artist working during this period was the painter Masaccio, known for his frescoes of the Trinity in the Church of Santa Maria Novella and in the Brancacci Chapel of the Church of Santa Maria del Carmine. But in Florence, Masaccio painted for less than 6 years but was highly influential in the early Renaissance for the intellectual nature of his work as well as its degree of naturalism. Though the Catholic Church remained a major patron of the arts during the Renaissance, from popes and other prelates to convents, monasteries, and other religious organizations, works of art were increasingly commissioned by civil government, courts, and wealthy individuals. Much of the art produced during the early Renaissance was commissioned by the wealthy merchant families of Florence, most notably the Medici family. From 1434 until 1492, when Lorenzo de' Medici, known as the Magnificent for his strong leadership as well as his support of the arts, died, the powerful family presided over a golden age for the city of Florence. The Medici family spent years in exile but returned in 1512 to preside over another flowering of Florentine art, including the array of sculptures that now decorates the city's Piazza della Signoria. Under High Renaissance art, there are the three great masters. The first one is Leonardo, who was the ultimate Renaissance man for the breadth of his intellect, interest, and talent, and his expression of humanist and classical values. Leonardo's best-known works, including the Mona Lisa, the Virgin of the Rocks, and the fresco The Last Supper, showcase his unparalleled ability to portray light and shadow, as well as the physical relationship between figures to humans, animals, and objects alike, and the landscape around them. The second one is Michelangelo Buonarroti, who drew on the human body for inspiration and created works on a vast scale. He was the dominant sculptor of the High Renaissance, producing pieces such as the Pieta in St. Peter's Cathedral and the David in his native Florence. He carved by the latter by hand from an enormous marble block. The famous statue measures 5 meters high, including its base. Though Michelangelo considered himself as sculptor first and foremost, he achieved greatness as a painter as well, notably with his giant fresco covering the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, completed over 4 years and depicting various scenes from Genesis. Lastly is Rafael Sancho, the youngest of the great high Renaissance masters, learned from both Da Vinci and Michelangelo. His paintings, most notably the School of Athens, painted in the Vatican at the same time that Michelangelo was working on the Sistine Chapel, skillfully expressed the classical ideals of beauty, serenity, and harmony. Among the other great Italian artists working during this period were Sandro Botticelli, Bramante Guardian, Titian, and Correggio. Renaissance art in practice. Many works of Renaissance art depicted religious images, including subjects such as the Virgin Mary or Madonna, and were encountered by contemporary audiences of the period in the context of religious rituals. Renaissance artists came from all strata of society. In addition to sacred images, many of these works portrayed domestic themes such as marriage, birth, and the everyday life of the family. Renaissance religion. Humanism encouraged Europeans to question the role of the Roman Catholic during the Renaissance. As more people learned how to read, write, and interpret ideas, they began to closely examine and critique religion as they knew it. Also, the printing press allowed for texts, including the Bible, to be easily reproduced and widely read by the people themselves for the first time. Martin Luther, a German monk, led the Protestant Reformation, which is a revolutionary movement that caused a split in the Catholic Church. Luther questioned many of the practices of the Church and whether they align with the teachings of the Bible. As a result, a new form of Christianity known as Protestantism was created. Art, architecture, and science were closely linked during the Renaissance. In fact, it was a unique time when these fields of study fused together seamlessly. For instance, artists like Da Vinci incorporated scientific principles such as anatomy into their work so they could recreate the human body with extraordinary precision. Architects such as Philippe or Brunelleschi studied mathematics to accurately engineer and design immense buildings with expansive domes. Additionally, Renaissance art was characterized by realism and naturalism. Artists strived to depict people and objects in a true-to-life way. They used techniques such as perspective, shadows, and light to add depth to their work. Emotions was another quality that artists tried to infuse into their pieces. Here are some of the most famous artistic works that were produced during the Renaissance. The Mona Lisa by Da Vinci. Indeed, the Mona Lisa is a very realistic portrait. The subject's softly sculptural face shows Leonardo's skillful handling of sfumato, an artistic technique that uses subtle gradations of light and shadow to model form and show his understanding of the skull beneath the skin. The second one is The Last Supper. It is one of the most famous artworks in the world, painted by Leonardo da Vinci probably between 1495 and 1498 for the Dominican monastery Santa Maria del Grazie in Milan. It depicts the dramatic scene described in several closely connected moments in the Gospels. According to Leonardo's belief that posture, gesture, and expression should manifest the notions of the mind, each one of the 12 disciples reacts in a manner that Leonardo considered fit for that man's personality. The third one is the Statue of David by Michelangelo. Why did Michelangelo paint the David? As a symbol of their own struggle against the Medici, Florentines adopted the David as a painting, and Michelangelo's masterpiece was too perfect for the place too high up on the cathedral. The statue of David is slightly cross-eyed, maybe intentionally, while the story of David hails from the Bible. Michelangelo based the physical form of the statue on the tenets of ancient Roman sculpture. The next one is The Birth of Venus by Botticelli. The composition of The Birth of Venus actually shows the goddess of love and beauty arriving on land, on the island of Cyprus, born of the sea spray and blown there by the winds, Zephyr and perhaps Aura. The goddess is standing on the giant scallop shell, as pure and as perfect as a pearl. Botticelli takes his inspiration from classical statues for Venus' modest pose as she covers her nakedness with long, blonde hair which has reflections of light from the fact that it has been glided. Even the winds the pair flying in one another's embrace is based on an ancient work. Lastly is the creation of Adam by Michelangelo. Michelangelo shows God creating human life. The most direct meaning in Michelangelo's creation of Adam is the moment when God created human life. As described in the book of Genesis in the Christian Bible, then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." End of the Renaissance. Scholars believe the demise of the Renaissance was the result of several compounding factors. By the end of the 15th century, numerous wars had plagued the Italian peninsula. Spanish, French, and German invaders battling for Italian territories caused disruption and instability in the region. Also, changing trade routes led to a period of economic decline and limited the amount of money that wealthy contributors could spend on the arts. Furthermore, in 1545, the Council of Trent established the Roman Inquisition, which made humanism and any views that challenged the Catholic Church an act of heresy punishable by death. By the early 17th century, the Renaissance movement had died out, giving way to the Age of Enlightenment. And that's all. Thank you.